Welcome everybody to our May 2024 Maturity Model for Microsoft 365 Practitioners call. Today we're both launching a new maturity article as well as talking about creating a mature employee experience. So we're looking forward to hearing some new thoughts about a competency that we've been kicking around for quite some time. Our guest stars are our own committees or whatever we are, our core groups, Simon Hudson and Sharon Weaver, who have been working on this maturity model article for quite some time, and we're excited to hear what they have to say. Who has the slide?
I have, and I've just managed to hide the damn controls. Click. There we go. Puppetry. There we go.
All right. So our agenda today is the same as it usually is. We're going to give a quick overview of what the maturity model for Microsoft 365 actually is for those of you who are new to these calls. We'll talk a little bit about what it consists of, what articles we have, what resources we have for you. We'll talk a little bit about who's been attending and take a picture, because that's what we do on these P&P calls. It's all about community. It's all about you. We want to make sure that we capture the happy faces of people who are joining us. We'll talk a little bit about how you can contribute to the effort. This is not the core group's work only. It's a lot of input from a lot of people, and we want to make sure that we give you lots of opportunities to participate if you need it. And then we'll talk about this new employee experience competency. If you're joining us for the first time, or you haven't gotten the full recurring calendar series, you can get it at that link, the aka.ms one at the top. And we also, a few months ago, started posting these calls on the same meetup group where the rest of the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform meetups are. So if you want to pay attention to when things are coming up and on Meetup, you can do that as well. There's no sort of registration. You can just make sure that it's on your calendar so you can join us when the calls happen.
So what is this all about? The purpose? What are we trying to achieve with the maturity model for Microsoft 365? So we've got a set of different competencies around those common areas of focus for businesses. But the purpose of this whole endeavor is to try and help all of us do cool stuff. That's what I like to think anyway. But it's allowing us to be able to talk to those decision makers, persuade them, and help them understand the impact of improving competencies, whether it might be around improving collaboration or communication, or something called Copilot and generative AI and the cognitive business. But it's allowing us to be able to kind of have that shared language understanding. It's very, the idea is not tech focused, it's business focused, so that we can, work with those business leaders to help them understand. And it's also about providing a way of getting focus. You're not about to do all the competencies all at the same time. It's looking at those competencies, understanding what the impact of them is, and then working out whether that is something which you want to benefit from, and being able to prioritize on those competencies. We've got a set of practical scenarios, which is really looking about how you can implement and improve the competencies, and supporting articles, looking into sort of things like principles of search communication, and the how to elevate documents are taking you how to move from one level to another. And the big one of today, of course, is employee experience, which has moved from being in progress to being published. So well done, team. Right, next slide, please. Sharon, this is for you.
Yeah. So, and I talk about this, a lot when we talk about what is the maturity model to begin with. And the maturity model is a practical set of information that allows you to measure your organization's levels in different areas. And this has been applied to the Microsoft stack around what tools kind of work at what levels. but this particular slide is talking about the different levels and the maturity that goes with them. So when you first start, kind of tracking where you're at a process level, it's that idea of like you're just doing things and you're not entirely sure what's going to happen, but you're just kind of putting out fires. And as you mature your processes, your people, your organization, you start to get into these different levels. Where you're starting to put some routine around things, you're starting to put process around things, you're starting to document things. And then as you go up the maturity level, you kind of have this sense of understanding what's happening when, and so everything is documented. And ultimately, at the top of the level, you're auditing things and you've got feedback around things and analytics around things, so that you're having this continuous integration or continuous improvement cycle of maturing your organization by paying attention to where you're at and making sure that you're trying to get to a better level. So this slide is kind of explaining how to understand where you're at and where you want to go.
Right, so it's time to capture a video. So we'd love you to be involved. So please turn on your video and we'll switch over to together mode and try and record this.
Don't be shy. We need to get more people turning on their cameras so that everyone realizes how many people love this call. Not that there's a competition going on or anything. Well, maybe a little bit.
Can I get it? See?
Need us to tell some jokes while you're clicking the buttons, Simon?
What's the one that I always, my favorite is what's brown and sticky. That'd be a stick, but anyway, that's my best one. Right, let me just see.
You doing the thing at your end, Simon?
I'm trying, and certainly I'm trying.
This is always the hardest part of every one of these calls. It's a technology problem. We're talking about all the business stuff, you know.
A PEBCAC on this one probably exists between chair and keyboard. Let's try that again.
I'll try and put it into together mode and we'll see if that works.
Yeah, if you could, that would be good. Yeah, because I think.
There we go.
It's not working for me.
It's not showing on as together mode on mine.
Okay, well that's all right. I've got it working, so that's all right. So we're going to go with the everybody wave, and then somehow one-handed, I'm going to try and do the screen capture thing. So everybody wave.
Oh, that's better.
Something just changed.
Right.
All right.
I have screen capture assigned to a one button push on my screen, so that actually did work. Good. Well done, everybody. Let's see.
I've got that as well.
That now. Cracking. Okay. Back over here. Still with you, Sharon.
Oh, sorry. Yes. I was answering chat questions. So yeah, we'd love to have your help. We meet once a month to discuss all these different competencies. And if anybody's interested in participating, let us know. We're happy to have you help us. If you're interested in learning more about this, I was actually just posting the links in there. So if you're interested in learning more about the maturity model for Microsoft 365, you can go to the Learn link that I put in the chat and read more about it. If you'd like to run a workshop, I put the link directly to the workshop in there as well, and it's also on this slide. But the idea is that basically, you know, if you want to like do this around your organization, or you want to kind of see where you stack up and in the different areas, you can use that tool to kind of get you started. If you want to see pre-existing recordings of all of the different sessions that we've done, you can go out to YouTube, where you can see the link right there at the bottom of the slide to go catch up on other ones that we've done in the past. But the idea of this is really just for us to get together as a group and talk about these things. And it's really interesting because I've had these conversations like nonstop for the last few months with Copilot. It's been just, you know, go, 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 go. Everybody talking about, you know, is my organization mature enough to even be able to handle things like Copilot that are coming in? And so I've directed a lot of people to this group over the last several months. I'm like, boy, do I have a group for you to participate in. So if you're here, please, number one, hope you get tons out of it. Number two, check out the Learn documentation and read more about it. Use it within your organization. Number three, please feel that this is a safe space to share your own thoughts and ideas. So feel free to chat, pop your hand up, get involved in the conversation. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if you are like, this is super cool and I'd like to play in this space, let us know. We'd love to have your help. We'd love for you to participate. We'd love for you to get involved in whatever way makes sense to you.
Right. Oh, traditionally you do this slide, mainly because you can remember what's going on.
All right. Well, let's see. We've had 4 sessions so far this year. This is our 5th. And if you can't figure it out, it's the green one. If you're colorblind, it's the one that's not the same as the rest of them. Creating a mature employee experience with Simon Hudson and Sharon Weaver talking about that particular competency which they've been working on. The things that are coming up next month on June 18th, we're going to revisit the content management competency. That's one of the ones that we've had around for quite some time, but over time we get new people coming to the calls. We've adapted some of our new thoughts into these articles, so nothing stays static, and we're going to, over the course of this year, revisit various competency articles like we did it back in March with staff and training and people and communities. We're going to take July and August off because not that many people come and join these meetings then anyway, and then we'll pick it up we will pick it up in September on my birthday, as it turns out, and talk about Copilot. Well, it's not for a while yet, and we old people don't really care about birthdays as much. So feel free to join us for the rest of the calls. The invitation that was on a prior slide will actually put all of the calls on your calendar.
I feel like we need to have a birthday party in the September session.
Maybe. So we had a great crowd for April when we were talking about the Power Platform Center of Excellence and other related topics, and those are the people who showed up for that one. We do meet as that prior slide said, every 3rd Tuesday of every month. So if you don't have the schedule handy, that's one to remember. If you want to contribute to the open source and community work that goes on around the Microsoft 365 platform, the PNP effort, which is its name changes every once in a while, but those of us who've been working on it for a while still call it PNP, which was Patterns and Practices. There are some sharing is caring sessions as well, though I think some of those haven't been scheduled for quite some time. But check that link out if you want to get more involved or you want to understand a little bit more about what's going on from a contributor's perspective. And drum roll, we're going to just jump into the main event, employee experience competency. Take it away, Sharon and Simon.
You go then, Sharon. You can take the intro and I'll get into the nitty-gritty stuff.
All right, sounds good. So we started talking about this a long time ago. Simon and I have been chatting for quite a while about this, and then within the core group, we've had a lot of just fantastic conversations about this. Around the idea of taking the maturity model and aligning it with a competency that really speaks to the employee experience specifically. And there's even a lot of discussion of, what parts of this are employee experience versus training versus other things. And so we've really done a lot of work to try to tease out the employee experience pieces of this particular component. And so for this competency, what we really want to talk about today is the idea of employee experience and what is a mature organization, or what are the different levels of maturity around employee experience. And we start that with the idea of, when we think about a great workplace, some of the things that we have in mind. And a lot of times people think about things like, maybe they have a clear company vision and values. The things are on here, right? Effective leadership. People know what's going on. They have a clear vision. People can talk to each other. They understand how to communicate. They understand where the communication is coming from. They don't feel like they're sitting in a vacuum or sitting in a silo somewhere in the organization. They feel like everybody kind of knows what's going on. They have opportunities for growth and advancement and development. So I know who I am. I know where I'm headed. I know that I have a path with the organization. I know that I have a future with the organization. I'm not just here as a gear or a cog kind of doing my thing every day, and I have no idea what's in store for me for the future. Recognition and rewards is a huge one. I know a lot of, very mature organizations not only have recognition and rewards in terms of like achievements and certifications, but also award ceremonies and where people get to walk across stage and be recognized by their peers for outstanding accomplishments and things like that. And work-life balance, and this has been a theme of essentially since, the pandemic, is the idea of does my employer understand that I'm a human being and that I need more than just showing up to work, or is their only concern about me for my, when I'm at work? And Simon, you're holding it, so I'm going to ask you to click on the next button. And so, why should we even worry about this? And so when we look at analytics, and one of the hallmarks that we'll talk about here as we go of a mature organization is that they care about analytics. So it's one thing to say, we want our employees to be happy, right? We want our employees to like working here. Maybe even we don't want our employees to leave, right? Those are different maturity level answers to employee experience. But when we start thinking about why does it matter, a really mature organization understands the analytics of why they're doing it. What is the ROI? Why does it matter to them? And some of the statistics that have come back is that highly engaged employees are more productive, but they're also more profitable. And so from a business perspective, not just a personal perspective, from a business perspective overall, the more employees are engaged, the more employees feel, like they've got a sense of purpose, the more profitable the business is. And so we have to think about, okay, if that's going to help our business overall, then what do we need to worry about? And so we think about some of these other analytics, like employees are going to stay longer if the company is more invested in them personally and their career growth. If they have more uninterrupted working time, if they are more engaged, if they have better training, if they have less calls, right? And so the things we think about are how can we then use these analytics to make that employee experience better so that we get the ROI that the analytics show us we will get if we do all of these things. Next slide. This is my favorite graphic. I know it's silly. I get so excited about a graphic, but this tells a story. I love using graphics and visualizations to tell stories. And one of the things that we've talked about immensely is this idea of the life cycle of an employee. And most people talk about the life cycle of an employee being the one in the little purple box. It's the idea, in my consulting practice, we talk about this all the time. We do tons and tons and tons of process automations around onboarding and offboarding. And that is always the conversation, is that an employee experiences from onboarding to offboarding. And I love that there's this extension around the graphic and the visualization, because at the end of the day, employee experience is beyond that. The employee experience starts the day that somebody thinks about a company, and not just what is that company, but I might like to work for that company. And I think about this a lot right now. I have 2 kids in college and one getting ready to go to college this fall. So I'll have 3 in college for the next year. And I think a lot when they talk to me about what their future is after they're done. And we talk about, well, what companies would you like to work for? And it's important to me to think about this pre-employee thing when you think about if you're a student and you're thinking about where you want to work. If maybe you're unhappy or not good in the job you're in, and you're thinking about where would I like to move to, maybe you're wanting to move up or move out or move to a different culture, and so you're thinking about what other company would I like to work for. So there's a very big piece of this pre-employee in terms of people thinking about reputations and understanding and culture and values of other companies long before they become an actual employee of that company. And I think many times we think about, the idea of companies hiring people and, well, I'm just going to look for a job, as opposed to I'm going to find a job that meets my values, that I can be in alignment with, that I can think about having a long-term relationship with. And so it's really important, that pre-employee piece. Once you're in, the active part of this employee experience is the idea of, once you've been hired and you're onboarded, then the employee experience switches to, I'm now working within the company. So I've been out. How do I feel when I got onboarded? How do I feel as an employee? Which theoretically should probably be the longest part of the life cycle. If it's a good place to work for and you're happy, that's going to be the longest part, is that engagement piece, which is really, really important, but not the only piece. And then at the end of the day, I think another thing we talk about in mature organizations is a less mature organization is going to think about the offboarding or the leaving as, oh, well, they're gone. But I think a more mature organization thinks about, I would like to help my employees be successful, whether that's here or elsewhere. And so when we think about when an employee departs, if we don't think about it as they're just gone and now they're out of my ecosystem, but instead we're doing everything we can to make people successful, and that might mean they need to leave this organization and go on to somewhere else. Are we continuing to support them in that journey? Are we offboarding them in a way that's going to make them successful? And at the end of the day, is there an alumni relation of some sorts that if they ever want to come back, or they want to refer their friends in, or they want to speak highly of this organization, that there's that post-employee experience that they're continuing to have? And if you think about global leaders in the employee experience space, many of them have all of these components where they're out recruiting for people to begin with, they're taking care of their employees while they're there, and then they have something afterwards to help them into better things or relationships to offer them opportunities. Maybe they're even partnering with other companies to give them an opportunity to work somewhere else and have them come back. Maybe they've got alumni relations where they're continuing to hang out with other previous employees. And there are even companies, large companies, where you continue to get employee perks of some sort at an alumni level for the remainder of your life if you've ever worked at certain companies, which is a really neat thing to think about, that they not only have they not forgotten about you, but they've now put you in this place where they're still going to continue to take care of you to some degree. So I just think this life cycle is really important to talk about when we're thinking about maturity, because often, like I said, we focus on that one little purple box, and there's so much more to the experience.
And I had a new thought about this morning after we'd finished all this sideware. Of course, this also applies to people moving around within organizations. If you move to a different division or a different team, there is still an element of that pre-employee before joining a new team and after you've left piece. So it's a much more granular diagram than I at first gave it credit for. If you've been in an organization for over a decade, I was in a big corporate for 15 years. I changed teams and departments and buildings and sites loads of times. And all of that pre-employee and post-employee piece applied. So that's a thought.
No, that's a good thought. Because, you can even, if you think about this and you bring it down to a smaller range, exactly, or departments, organizations, even teams, you can think about this in the same idea of, does that team fit my culture? Do I want to move over there for the right reasons? And when I depart the team, are they welcoming me back? Are they helping me to go where I need to go to be successful? Or, is there that kind of lower maturity level of, okay, you're not here anymore, bye.
Right, so let's have a look at this. So the first thing is that this competency is huge. It's why it's taken us so long to get it out. We were working on this in the fall or the autumn, for those of us on the proper side of the planet, last year. And the reason it's so big is really it's 4 competencies. So what we do with the Microsoft 365 maturity model is we align it. It's inspired by the technologies that Microsoft have. And so when Microsoft brought out Viva, that's what prompted us to go and think about building an employee experience model. And then Microsoft produced this chart, and actually they've said there are 4 different pillars in employee experience. Their words, not ours, but it's still a good model. And so we've ended up incorporating all of those. Each one of these connection, insight, growth, and purpose could have been a competency in its own right. But we've munged it all together into this massive competency called employee experience. So we're going to look at the four elements of this in due course. I want to draw your attention though to the stuff on the right hand side, the things on the right hand side, starting with well-being. These are some of the softer elements. So I want to make the point that not everything which drives employee experience can be measured easily or is driven by Microsoft technology or anything else. Some of it is just about how we feel about stuff. So there's a whole bunch of different subtleties and nuances and sensations associated with great employee experience that are not always that objective, but still very important. So let's have a look at an overview. I've got somewhere in the region of 20 odd minutes to get through all this. That's encouraging. The first thing you'll notice is that the writing is very small. I have cherry picked, putting these slides together, a few key things just to illustrate what's in the competency, but there are hundreds of characteristics at each level, broken down by those four things of purpose and connection, etc., etc. So we can't go through them all. That'd be crazy in the time we've got. But I want to just give you a sense of what the overall feeling looks like. And as usual, I talk about level 100 being the rubbish level. I sometimes use worse words than that, but most of you can imagine what it's like to be in an organisation where the employee experience is pretty darned awful, and you've probably got really bad memories of that, maybe even flashbacks and waking up in the middle of the night with bad dreams about some of them. I know I have. So let's just think about what really awful looks like. Level 100 employee experience is characteristic in dysfunctional organizations. And again, some things that we've picked out, often no vision or strategy or common purpose that people can rally around, this sense that nobody really knows what they're doing, and no one really is looking out for each other. There's a lack of care for the people in that organization. I've managed to miss that a couple of times in my career by the thinnest of margins of ending up working for organizations that just don't care about each other. So those soulless organizations, or sometimes the organizations that have got soul but haven't got it together yet, sit down at level 100. And then, as usual, we move up to level 200, where the organization recognizes that they've got problems and start to try to build a better organization. So level 200s are characterized by being tryhards. Not necessarily very effective, but they're trying. And so you give them credit for that. So at level 200, they're starting to try and have a defined strategy, have some sense of purpose, and push that down so that people know what everyone's about. I mean, I talk about it a lot, but I've literally, you can't see me, but up on my, I don't think, but up on my wall, touching my hand right now on my set of business principles. And in all of my organizations, I've made sure that everyone knows about the business principles and the values and the mission that we try to work to. Not everyone hears it, not everyone gets it, but a level 200 organization, at least they're trying to share that common purpose, and that's great. And because of that, staff seem to think, to get this feeling of being in it together. It might be pretty rough and chaotic, but at least we're all trying together, and that's a good sign. Managers know that they should be providing good experiences for their staff and not just be miserable and horrible to them. We're not working in one of those Dickensian orphanages. So they're trying to do their best, but they don't always know how they should do it or who they should do it to, which is part of the problem right there. And there's a bunch of impacts of that. So unlike level 100, where people are disenfranchised or actively negative about their organization, at level 200, staff and their customers, as a consequence, rarely say negative things about the organization in public, but they might have those quiet chats about this is not as good as it should be, or that was awful, or but there is a sense that people are trying. And often staff themselves are proactively trying to make things better. Not always effectively, and sometimes they aren't getting the resources they need to do it, but they're trying. So you get these pockets of effort. People try and make their world a little bit better. That's good, and so forth. And I could spend all day on this slide alone, so I better move on. Level 300. Level 300, generally the organization is pretty good. Most things work quite smoothly. The organization itself understands what it looks like to have reasonable employee experience and cares about it. The staff start to be fans of and advocates for the organization they work for. They tell people publicly, it's a decent place to work, you should come here as well. That leads to improved recruitment, for example. They try to live up to the promises they make to each other, to their objectives, to their managers, and to their customers. They care about everybody that they're in contact with in a professional sense, and the organization itself starts to see things like profitability and retention and other improvements across the board. And then you can imagine that we keep going up this scale, and I'm going to get into the detail of level 400 and 500 on the next few slides, but we then start to see the organization measuring those impacts, putting in active programs to improve things, finding what the blockers are to good experiences and removing them. And because they recognize the benefits that doing all that has on the well-being of themselves, their staff, and the people who are invested in the company, often literally the investors. So let's have a look at some of this and break it down into these sub-competencies that I mentioned. Just a reminder, these are the competencies. I'm going to go through each of these 4 in the remaining 20-ish minutes so we can finish and have some chat. I'll be equally as brief, and I've been super brief now. I've taken out impacts, which we've typically had in these sessions, and I'm just going to pick out some characteristics at each level by each of these sub-competencies. And again, I'm not going to go through them all, but we'll pick a couple, we'll cherry pick a couple out of each level. So in terms of connection, that sense of the way that people work with each other and or connect to each other and connect to the organization. At level 100, they don't really know what experience even is. There's little sense of camaraderie. There's sporadic at best communication from the top down or the bottom up, and it tends to be pretty single channeled, and if you missed it, you missed it forever. So if there's a briefing, you weren't there, good luck with finding out what was said. The staff don't feel supported, and actually there's some observable exclusion of particular staff on all sorts of different bases, depending on the what passes for culture. But some staff feel actively excluded from the organisation. You often see the lack of care in terms of things like the quality of the equipment, the upkeep of equipment. So it's really easy to spot a dysfunctional organisation in terms of the employee experience. Let me move to 200. There are active attempts to keep people in the loop. There are communication channels, there are emails, there are potentially news feeds and other things. They still tend to be a bit sort of one-directional and one-dimensional, but there are active efforts to keep staff in the loop. Tends to be single direction again, but at least there's efforts. There are frustrations because the organisation isn't yet very good at dealing with people who are a pain in the arse. In a professional sense. So if you've got somebody, and everyone knows those people who are dysfunctional, annoying, aggravating, cause friction, upset people, but the organization hasn't worked out how to get rid of them or modify them so that they're decent people and not the kind of people that everybody else would like to throw under a bus, proverbially or otherwise. So there's recognition of problems, but not necessarily understanding of how to solve the problems at level 200. There are gaps in the way that the organisation deals with people's individual needs. So, way back in the day, I still have repetitive strain injury. I've had it most of my professional life, and yet the organisation maybe doesn't realise that it has to provide bigger screens for some people, or track mouse for some people, or other ways of working. Everyone gets the same tools. Can somebody turn that mic off that someone's got running in the background, please? Level 300. At level 300, the communication channels are starting to get pretty good. Oftentimes you can raise questions during and after a piece of briefing or communication. Often those briefings are persistent. You can get to them later. So if I happen to be on holiday when the briefing took place, I can maybe dial in remotely, or I can pick it up later. There is an active attempt to be an inclusive organisation and to stamp out discrimination wherever it occurs. So that's a great thing. You start to feel a real sense of inclusion and camaraderie, and let's call it what it is: a sense of love between people. Probably only in one of the senses of love. Let's think about the way that communication takes place. It isn't just top down, but we've now got peer-to-peer comms. Managers do regular one-to-one sessions, and those that are both formal and informal. So it feels a lot more like counselling and mentoring, and all those are softer ways of telling people how to be better at what they do. And critically, in many ways, people start to trust the leadership. So when the leaders say we're going to do this, people get behind it and go, yeah, we can do that. We'll help you with that, even if they don't always know why it is that a decision to do a thing has been done. That's powerful. Moving up again, at level 400, those people that we just talked about, those bad apples, those bad actors in the organization, those are actively dealt with in a variety of forms, hopefully in a caring, sharing way. But if that doesn't work, there are ways to take people out of the organization who don't carry the values and purposes of the organization and move them to somewhere else, wherever that might be. Staff become really actively vocal about what a great place it is to work. This thing about constructive feedback, 360 feedback and constructive feedback at every level, that's considered a gift, not a criticism anymore. And the leadership are trusted and respected, and the leadership tend to involve staff at all levels in what they're trying to do in the decision making. And then right up at level 500, that's a really simple one of only a few different characteristics, but both before and after being part of the organization, there are proactive experiences. The organization proactively adapts to what both the mission of the organization is and the organizational landscape in which it works and the nature and needs of its staff. And so as you see the nature of the demographics of the organization sort of move from old fogies like Marc and I through to Generation Zs who've got a very different set of needs from us older folk. The organization adapts to accommodate that, and that's a really positive thing, because those people are going to be the leaders of the organization in another decade or two. Right, let's see what it looks like from a insight point of view. So insights are the ways that the organization measures how good they are at employee experience and some other things. And at level 100, as you'd expect, the organization's got no idea. They're not measuring. They're doing very little to try and assess what the mood of the organization is. There's very little management by walking about and feeling the pulse of the people. There's limited line reporting, almost no surveys, no metrics, no just whatever it is you do to find out what's going on in the organization, they're not doing that. Level 200, while staff often feel uncertain and frustrated about what's going on, they do feel that there are at least some ways that they can make those frustrations known, whether that's to line management or occasional staff surveys. So there are some communication, multi-way communication options. The way that the organization gets feedback from the staff probably is characterized as sporadic and inconsistent, but at least it's happening. There are even some tools for it. There could be surveys, there can be engagement forums, and those kinds of things, communities of interest, but it's just not well supported. Staff, so each other, managers, supervisors, even leadership, actually care about their staff. They're just not always sure what to do about that. Some managers even think about things like employee workload and skills and activities and how to build effective teams. Again, they may not be very good at it, but they're trying. Level 300, staff mostly feel informed about what's going on. And actually, there's some measurement by the organisation in terms of how staff feel, how they respond to changes in the organisation. There maybe even be some, some sentiment analysis in a variety of ways to figure out, what the mood of the organisation is. Practical things like if staff are away, well, there's some monitoring of, well, how many staff are away and why, and what happens when they come back. Things like staff turnover, likewise, they're looking to see, the metrics to see how many staff, come and go, and how does that benchmark against other organisations. There's a bunch of tools in use now for workplace analytics and gathering those metrics, not just none or some, a bunch of different ways of doing it to measure different things. And there's active measurement now, an assessment of, do we have the right skills and skill blends in our organisation to do what we want? If not, how are we going to address that? So some actual thinking about skill matrices. Level 400 is getting even better, lots of tools, active use of workplace analytics to see that we are who we want to be or who we think we are, use of those tools to create action plans, and active checking that staff feel included in what's going on. And then at level 500, active strategies, really clever, sophisticated, agile, active strategies to make sure that employee engagement and employee experience are, world class, because world class experience generates world class people, and that generates world class organizations. So staff capabilities, their changing needs and skills, and what drives individuals are actively looked at and used to sort of map out their journeys within organizations, because great people working in the right place in great organizations continues to make those organizations great. And people's insights are used to map out organizational strategy and roadmap. And the staff love being there. That's the other big thing, and you can measure that. Next, I'm cracking on with this really well. Good, we should have some time for some some chat afterwards. Growth. So the growth piece is all about, well, how do we develop those skills and capabilities in the organization? And at level 100, there's virtually none. You're sat at your desk or wherever you are and told to go and do your job. There's little in the way of training, little in the ways of skills assessment, and this whole idea that when people get together around a cup of coffee and talk about things, oh, that's wasting staff time. You should be at your desk doing your job. So that's a level 100 mindset. Not allowed to have conversations with your colleagues in case you're not answering the phone or something. But level 200, actually, some people recognize that water cooler conversations, coffee breaks are actually quite possible, but there is a concern that maybe they're a bit too long or they're not being used productively. So they're allowed to happen, but there are some concerns about it. Staff are expected to learn on the job, and they probably do. But the improvements that people make by doing those are often not really recognized and therefore not rewarded by the organization. People are kind of doing it for themselves as opposed to being encouraged to do it by the organization. There's no process or active mechanism for people to get better. It's done on people's own merits. There are often attempts to do what we used to call knowledge management and best practice sharing. However, often those approaches or attempts fail because they're not resourced, there's not oversight, there's not some governance around that, and it isn't driven out actively across the organization. Managers often, are trying really hard, but they don't know how to make things better. They don't know how to train their staff or provide mentoring for them, and they don't really talk to each other to find out what they should be doing. The managers themselves tend to have to learn on the job. Level 300. Getting pretty good by now. Water cooler meetings, or what I call non-purposeful get-togethers. And in Sweden, I learned this a couple of weeks ago, there's a fika culture, an active coffee break that people are expected to attend. It isn't you get together and go off and have a coffee with your mates, there's a regular break where everyone goes off and gets together and talks about the day or themselves or what insights they've just had. So fika breaks, which are actively encouraged for people to do, sharing of things that they've learned. I think that's a great thing. We try and do that virtually in my organizations because most of us are virtual, and you can make that work then as well. Why not have a quarter of an hour break in the morning and the afternoon where we all get onto Teams and talk to each other about whatever we want? So that starts to happen at level 300. Learning and growth objectives are actually part of people's personal objectives as well as organizational objectives. There's this sense that we want to grow people and become a growing and learning organization. So we start to see growth being part of key performance measures and those other things. I've forgotten what the word it is. KPRs. Employees have opportunities to play to their personal strengths, and the organization looks at people's personal strengths and uses that to map out where they want to go, those people to go in the organization, and starts to create opportunities for them to multi-skill where appropriate. Level 400. So at level 400, there are training programs actively employed at all levels. They take account of things like people's personal skills and objectives, as well as organizational needs and organizational gaps. Often those actually lead to certifications that people can be proud about, and they can publish those certificates. And those certificates can be from trivial things like having a little badge you can put at the bottom of your email, like many of us do, through to full-blown certifications and association membership and other things. What else have we got on there? Learning and growth are often mandatory elements of personal objectives. So you're expected, and actually you'll fail your objectives if you don't do learning and growth. So people have got to do it appropriate with whatever their roles are. Help me out here, Sharon. I just need to grab a moment to let my brain cool down. Pick a couple of things off the level 500 because you do level 500 stuff. Do a level 500 or 2 characteristic for learning and growth for me.
Yeah, you've been great. I'm sitting here enjoying this. Level 500 around maturity and growth is, to that point by 400, you are doing training. It's required. It's part of your organization. But when you get to 500, not only are you doing it, you're also training others. So think about companies that are doing such a good job at training their own people and requiring it and covering it that they're behind them saying, we want you to go out in the community. We want you to be part of this, knowledge sharing and industry thought leadership. And not only do we want that, but we're going to support you. We're going to promote you. We're going to encourage you. We're going to fund it. I think so that other companies can see that your employees are not only trained and feel confident about what they're doing, but they feel so secure in their role and what they're doing that they're out sharing that knowledge and that thought leadership with others in their industry.
Cool. Right, last one, and then we'll leave some time for questions. I'm going to whiz through this as quickly as I can. So this is about purpose, and this is one of my favorite things, is trying to get organizations all lined up around a common purpose. And at level 100, unsurprisingly, there kind of isn't one. You're told what your job is and you're expected to get on with it. And I think we'll leave level 100 there for now, because we know what it's like to have an organization that doesn't have a shared vision, purpose, or even a set of cultural objectives and ethics. At level 200, kind of the same. There's an attempt to articulate the culture as well as the purpose and the vision. Not everyone buys into it at level 200, though, which I think's sad. And not a lot is done about people who don't buy into that culture and strategy and vision. More importantly, in some cases, standards of behavior aren't well established, and people who behave badly aren't necessarily dealt with effectively. And that, for me, is a really big risk. If people who are not doing the right things and looking after each other are not dealt with, that ends up corroding the entire culture. And you can actually fall back down to level 100 and become an unhealthy organization. At level 300, again, as usual, we're getting okay. You know, people, Sharon and I talk about this a lot. We think level 300 is kind of, you know, the minimum that most organizations should be at most of the time. So at level 300, the company ethos and values and are really shared and well established, and there's a tangible culture. You can ask people about the culture of the organization, and they can describe it, which is pretty cool. The executive vision and strategy both links to those, but also draws from those vision and cultural sort of touchstones. And culture and values now starts to appear in the hiring process. Again, from my point of view, whenever I sat in on a hiring decision, my primary interest is this person going to fit my organization, regardless of their skills? There's this sense that I can teach somebody to do something, but not if they're the wrong kind of a person. We also see some other sort of measures. Typically, in purposeful organizations, they look after things like the workspace that people are expected to work in. Yeah, the place isn't too cluttered, the equipment works. If it's not working, it tends to get fixed. And there are processes for getting things which aren't right reported and dealt with in a reasonably timely fashion. There are active attempts, not always great, but active attempts to make new staff feel welcome and to make sure that people who are leaving on really good terms. You know, people are giving, you know, farewell events, you know, whether that's going down to the pub or a meal out, or at least a farewell celebration in the department that they're leaving. And things like health and well-being start to be recognized as part of being in the company. And then we move up to 400. And I usually strive to create level 400 organizations in terms of purpose. So culture, values, purpose, behaviors are all really well defined and monitored, and people are expected to comply or buy into those. And if they're not, well, there are mechanisms to either buy them in or move them on. So it's an essential part of the hiring process and is often written into the job spec. The equipment that we talked about already, there's really very little that's ever found to be wrong if something fails or isn't as good as it could be. If there's a bit of grit in the mechanism of running the organization, it gets reported, dealt with, and fixed. And that happens quickly, so that people are never a bit annoyed about things.
I think that's I see that the most. I see that particular comment the most in high-end, high mature organizations, is that the thing that does not fit gets rejected quickly and easily, as opposed to having to make it. There's the chat right now. The talk is, if the culture is bad, it's hard to change. But if the culture is good, it also rejects the bad.
Yes, absolutely. It's really cool. And you see it in everything. You know, the processes work, but you know, just everything starts to look shiny, and the people shine as a consequence. And then at level 500, we've got this concept that it becomes a self-supporting culture. Everybody is so committed to the mission and the purpose, whatever that is, that they all manage it. There aren't really any exceptions at 500. Everyone works together to make it all work. And goals and priorities flow into both personal and team and department and whole organization activities and objectives. Doesn't happen in that many organizations. These things are rare. You know, these are not quite unicorns, but they're certainly pretty rare. You know, the vision and values are intimately connected to the strategy and KPIs, or KPIs, whichever they are. Everyone understands that and contribute to creating those. And the workplace itself is an exciting place to be. It doesn't have to just have bean bags, but you know, it's a great place to be. So that's where we've got to on that. Couple last slides, and then we'll move on. So I'm going to reiterate some of the tools and analytics that are supported by the Microsoft Viva stuff. Some of the mechanisms for creating community and communication. There's some great Microsoft Viva stuff there that supports that. But I don't want anyone to go away thinking, we'll put Viva in and we've solved all of our problems and we're up to level 300 or above. You know, the people processes, the people engagement, that sense of camaraderie and community is absolutely as big a part of this as anything you can do with the tech. So don't forget that. And I'm just going to mention some problems that still exist with this competency before we open up the floor. One is, this should have been an animated slide, but anyway, it hasn't animated. So we've got two other overlapping competencies at the moment. There is the people and communities competency, and there is a staff and training competency. And all of these things seem to overlap with the employee experience competency. And I don't think we can fix that. The reality is that there are some things that quite rightly and justifiably overlap. Maybe if you're trying to sort out employee experience, also look at the other competencies and treat these as part of a bigger whole. So it just is. It's a complex, very large and interwoven set of things. And I'm going to just leave this final slide up here on the deck as we move into answering any questions or comments that people have got. These are just some things which could form or be a measure of, have we got a great experience? Right. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, or there are any questions which have been asked that we want to curate and provide live answers to, stick your hand up. And we've got a first willing victim. Pia, fire away.
Yeah, I was going to say that when I talk about the fika, well, I'm Swedish and we do the fika all the time, and it's mandatory if you're in the public sector. When I talk, I do a lot of leadership coaching, and I tell them that it's so important to have the social, to have the connections, to just talk, to just, have a cup of coffee and like, oh, you have cats, and oh, you've bought a new car, because when shit hits the fan, and we don't have time to ask nicely. It's like, oh, it would be great if you could go over there and get the fire extinguisher if you have a moment. No, because like when shit hits the fan, you really have to just like do the work, be really hard. And if you have good relationship and if you really know each other, then you will not be offended and you will be able to execute fast, and you will do it as a good team. So it's not all like fluffy. It's fun to have fun at work. It's so important that you have a good team. When we look at teams that really work well under stress, police, military, in the ER, they don't have time to be polite and nice and, take its time and like, I'll send an email and per the last request or whatever. So we really need to build solid social connections between each other. So when we really need to move fast, we can do that and to the point.
I completely agree, Pia. I think there's got to be people that you just know you can trust to help you out. Will do all the right things without even being asked. My question for you is, how have you seen people do that when we've got virtual workers?
Well, when I do the coaching and I help people set up their teams, I have two channels that are mandatory, obviously general, because you can't do anything about it. And the other one is social. And this is the social is where we do these things, where we get to know each other, where we actually put in like the old wiki tab. And now we do it in OneNote. I have this about this team and the channels to say like, this is where we put up the cute cats, the ugliest coffee mug. If you want to bitch and moan that you got a parking ticket, this is the place where you would do that. And I teach all these leaders also the importance of that. You need to be responsible to have this conversation going, because when this place goes quiet, it's because something has happened and they talk someplace else. They talk on Facebook, they talk on WhatsApp, and you are out of the loop and your team is breaking down.
Do you have virtual fika?
Yeah, of course, we're Swedish.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah,
I love it.
That's one thing I regret that I didn't do. We used to have a Monday morning, team meeting, and exactly as you said, easily 50% of it was just chatting to each other, and then eventually, we'd actually talk about what we're going to do for the week. But we never implemented this idea of having a get together in the morning and the afternoon, and I regret that. I didn't know that fika existed a month ago, and now I do.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. Which is why I've included the word fika in the competency. Are there any other Any other hands or questions?
I think so. Yeah, we introduced the 15 minutes at the start of the morning for our social catch up because the team demanded it. They sort of they wanted to be able to connect, especially if we were all working remotely. It's really important to have that.
And I've also started to implement, because I was working with the Swedish church, so the church taught me this, is that when I have talked about a concept or something that everyone needs to do something with, I don't open up the table for questions. I say that we're going to go around the table and say, how do you feel about this? So everyone will have to speak. No one can be silent, and they're all, because then also the power of them speaking, like hearing themselves say it, is huge. And also I open up for all the negative stuff as well, because they're like, okay, this is frustrating. This is a lot. I don't know if we can time this. And then be like, yes, I know this is hard and I'm here for you. So I can help you with that. But just like having them hear themselves say it. And also, I don't allow anyone to be silent, because this is how we take decisions in Sweden. We don't, there's no decisions taken that is written down or anything. We nod and smile and look each other in the eye. If we don't do that, there is no decision because we are consensus, which is so weird. So like, there's so many things that never happen in Sweden. It's very frustrating. But I forced them to talk to each other and look them, in the eye. So I said, like, so we agree that we're going to stop sending emails about these topics, and we're going to use the social channel for this. Is this okay? How do we feel about this? And we go around the table. Like,
You've
it's
used that
like,
word twice now, Pia, and I want to just really highlight it, this thing about feel. Not what do you think about it? How do you feel about it? An excellent boss of mine back in the day, you used to really challenge me because I'd talk about, I think we should do this. And, yeah, but how do you feel about it? I think tapping into that feelings of people and getting them to express it, that's unbelievably potent at building these kinds of cultures.
Yeah.
Stuff. Do we have any more? I'm conscious that we're over time, but I can talk about this all day if people want to stay.
Yeah, I have to run in a minute, but I thank you guys so much for being here. This has been such a great journey, and we'll continue to push a ton more out about this. But it's so important, I think, especially the last 4 or 5 years have really brought to the forefront how important employee experience is, and so to be able to talk about this and push this out, it's just been really exciting.
And Marc, you actually posted the link to the competency, which I'm really chuffed is out there. I hadn't expected it to be done in time. I've just put it in the bottom of the chat again. So this massive body of work, it's yours, free to do with however you will. But if you can think of ways to improve it, please tell us. I can't get the whole thing in my head anymore. It's too big. So I need people to actually go and have a look at it and tell us which things could be better worded or written more briefly or changed. So please give us feedback, or go and use it and tell us how it works. Well, I think that's it. Well done, everybody, for living through all that.
You want to just go to that last slide?
Oh yeah,
so
there's a slide,
at least
isn't
it's
there?
in the video that
Great
the links to some of our social stuff when the next call is, and some of the popular links to our YouTube channel, slide decks, things like that. Thanks, everybody.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you,
See you next month.
guys.